Hello viewers and welcome to McElroy's Motors, and in today's video is going to be quite a unique one because I'm getting blinded by the sun. Okay, I am lying. That's not the reason why I'm making this video here today, despite being filmed in December.
Yes, I'm fully aware that my autistic self forgot it was January.
If you've been following my YouTube channel recently or at all, you'll know that this is my 1997 Saturn SL1 that I paid $3,000 for back in October, and it's been my daily driver ever since. But despite having her usual plastic body panels, there's nothing really about this car that makes it stand out in terms of quirks and features. Did I say quirks and features? Wrong channel for that. There's nothing really about this car that makes it stand out from the crowd, at least in my book. There's nothing really weird, interesting, or indeed unusual about it. Apart from a few things, like for example, it has a manual driver's side mirror, but an electric passenger side mirror, the fact that the power window switches are located between the two front seats, and the fact that it was named after our planet, unlike the Ford's Mercury division, which was named after the famous singer of Queen who died of AIDS. So anyway, in this video I am going to be discussing what are the top 25 vehicles I would like in my 25 car dream garage. Let's get started.
Please don't make me include that Tesla! I'm going to kick the list off here by talking about one of Chrysler's biggest failures, as well as the car I had owned for my very first car. This is the Eagle Premier, and what an interesting car it is. This car was meant to compete with cars like the Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable, as well as the likes of Audi and Volvo. However, what makes it very interesting was its overall history and sales numbers. Faced with the buyout of Chrysler, the American Motors Corporation revived themselves as Eagle for 1988, with the Premier being the flagship, and being designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, who was famous for designing cars like the Lotus Esprit as well as the DeLorean. The Eagle Premier was aiming to sell 140,000 units per year between its production run of 1987 and 1992. But of course, with poor parts support and poor sales numbers, Chrysler had sold 139,000 units during its entire production run. Finding an Eagle Premier these days, as well as its kin the Dodge Monaco, is damn near impossible, but I want one very badly indeed. For any of my YouTube followers, this will be no surprise. I am definitely an Eastern Bloc vehicle enthusiast, and one of my all-time dream cars is the Trabant 601, built from 1963 up until 1990. This was the people's car of East Germany, and I used to own one myself. And if you were to say that I am not tempted to buy back the Trabant I had for the third time in a row, you would be badly mistaken. Besides being a fan of the Trabant and other Eastern Bloc vehicles, I'm also a big fan of the two-stroke engine, mainly because of how simple they are as opposed to a regular four-stroke engine. And one of the most famous two-stroke cars of them all was the early Saabs, more specifically the Saab 93. I just love the way they look and the overall simplicity of its engine layout, with the generator being also the water pump. As Jay Leno once said, imagine the British coming up with such a thing. It would be impossible. Time now to be sensible here and to cure my Tesla phobia. This is the Fiat Multipla, and some may say that it is the ugliest car ever made. But even though I somehow agree with it, I cannot argue with the fact about how innovative it was, being able to carry 6 people in a package no bigger than a Mini Cooper. Who could not go wrong with that? I was first introduced to my dream truck when I was playing Gran Turismo 4 on my uncle's PlayStation. This is the Daihatsu Midget II, and just look at it. Look how charming and adorable it is. It sure does prove that size doesn't matter when it comes time to turning heads. And I am most certainly guaranteeing you that even with one windshield wiper, this thing will turn more heads than even Tesla's ugly and horrendously built Cybertruck. Coming back to when I was such a small boy, my grandfather introduced me to the Wallace and Gromit cartoons of the 1980s and 1990s, and in the 2005 film The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, they featured an Austin A35 similar to what you see in the pictures here, and I've been wanting one ever since I first saw the film. But of course, no one could talk about film cars without talking about possibly the most famous film car of them all, the Ford Anglia 105E. Featured in the Harry Potter film The Chamber of Secrets, this car has always been a firm favorite of mine. Maybe I can modify it and make it fly. Who knows with technology these days. I have got to be the only guy on YouTube who dreams about owning not one but two cars being built on the subcontinent of India. This is the Tata Nano. With a base price back then of $2,500 or 100,000 rupees, the Tata Nano was supposed to get India on four wheels, but failed miserably because in India, buying a car is a status symbol. So if you're buying something that is supposed to be the cheapest car in the world, you must be poor. But either way, I love its Pikachu ear-shaped headlights and overall egg-shaped appearance. It is so charming to me. What is also interesting to me is that in 2018, the final year of production of the Nano, Tata only sold one. But despite having a record of actually catching fire, there's no disguising the fact that I do want one of these egg-shaped suppositories. The second Indian car on my list is one that lived a very long production life. Starting in 1958 and ending production in 2014, the Hindustan Ambassador was the first production car in India, providing transportation to millions of people. I just think with its overall 50s design, with its terrible, crappy plastic interior, just adds to its charm. This was the official taxi cab of India, and I can honestly see why. Time now to give a special YouTuber a shout out because he actually owns one of these. Hubnut, if you are watching, this is for you, buddy. And like the Hindustan Ambassador, this car stayed in production for a long time. This is the Citroën 2CV, the French people's car, the tin snail, whatever you want to call it. But whatever you want to call it, I absolutely adore the simplicity of this car. But despite its simplicity, the Citroën 2CV was offered to be the farmer's car for France. You could carry a basket of eggs on the passenger seat, and none of these will break. Believe it or not, I actually have seen one of these in person. I was driving through the state of Indiana on my way up to Michigan, and despite wanting one based on pictures, seeing one amplified that want. I want one more than my next breath now. Coming back to my love of two-stroke engines as well as Easter block vehicles, I have a soft spot for the other East German car, the Wartburg 353. This was the higher-up car. Think of it as like the East German Audi and you're in the right area. I have actually seen a couple of Wartburgs in my lifetime thanks to a good friend of mine in Virginia. I have been wanting one since I first saw one at the International Spy Museum for 2021. The Toyota brand has been around since 1936, and during that time it has established themselves as being reliable, commendable, if nothing exciting. But have a look at this. This is the Will VI, and it is such an ugly duckling, and I want it so badly. The Will brand was supposed to be targeted towards the younger audience, but failed miserably, having lasted just 2 model years. And no, this car was not named after Will Smith.
Keep my name out your fucking mouth!
Well, crap. This got awkward. Anyways.
If you are thinking that I am trying to copy aging wheels by actually wanting a Reliant Robin in my lifetime, get that thought out of your head. I just think the overall concept is very interesting. Having a 3-wheeled vehicle in England means you qualify for motorcycle tax, and given the fact that these cars have a rather sumptuous history, that just adds to its perfection to me. They are terrible, but I want one. I think it is plainly obvious by now that I am into weird, unusual cars. Have a look at this. This is the BMW Isetta. Originally built by a fridge-making company, the Isetta was the car that actually saved BMW. And just look how adorable it is! How could you not want one of these things? Anyhow, I do know that there's a modern-day version of the Isetta called the Microlino, but to me, it is just not the same. The next car on my list is not weird, but it is definitely interesting. In the 1980s, in response to Chrysler launching the Eagle brand, Ford brought over some imported cars under a mark of their own. The mark was known as Merkur, and what a complete sales flop it was, being only just shy better than Ford's Edsel division of the 1950s. The Scorpio was Merkur's second and last model, and being the rarest of the two, staying in production from 1988 up until 1989 when the Merkur brand dissolved altogether. Do you want something American, but yet makes a Tesla Cybertruck look completely conventional? Do you also want something that happens to look like an aging, moldy block of cheese? Boy, do I have the answer for you. This is the CitiCar, built in limited numbers by Sebring Vanguard in Sebring, Florida. And just by looking at it alone, it is so horrifically ugly and so horrifically awful that I cannot resist putting this one on my list. Now to my European viewers, this may appear to be just your bog standard Austin Maestro of the 1980s. But if you look carefully, you'll realize that it definitely is not that at all. In fact, if I were to tell you the actual name of this car, you may think I am making it up. Ladies and gentlemen, from China, I present the FAW Etsong Lubao CA6410UA, one of China's very first production cars. I think it is fair to say that the Chinese auto industry is something that definitely deserves to be studied, mainly because in recent times they have been releasing some pretty awesome cars in recent times. But then again, just 30 years prior, they were building garbage like this. Built by a factory that had to tell the authorities they were building buses, the factory itself was China's equivalent of a tobacco company? Think of that what you will. There is absolutely nothing cool, quirky, or indeed interesting about owning a box-standard Ford Tempo, but I have a soft spot for these cars, mainly because I learned to drive in one. My grandmother had one when I was 13, hers was Oxford White, and a 1994 model. The acceleration on these cars can be measured by watching a rock erode in your hand, and overall for the styling's sake, there's nothing interesting about it at all, but the nostalgia of this car takes over above everything else. I can't help but smile every time I look at a Ford Tempo and just reconcile the memories that will never ever be forgotten. French cars have always had a reputation of being somewhat weird and bizarre, and in the case of the Peugeot 1007, it is no exception. I can honestly say that this is by far easily the weirdest car to come out of Peugeot in the last 20 years, complete with the electronic sliding doors and pick-a-mix dashboard. That being said though, this car has a reputation of being absolutely rubbish, but I cannot help but think of just how innovative and different this car actually is, and no matter what people say, I can't help but want one. I want one very badly indeed. Tanner Faust once said that the minivan itself is the bane of the automotive existence. It is plainly obvious that he's never driven a Renault Avantime just yet. A minivan that provides the space of a minivan, but the open-air feeling of a grand tour. Who would not turn this down? I certainly wouldn't. To me, this is just the dream minivan for weird car lovers like myself. And in terms of sales numbers, the Avantime sold equally poorly, selling less than 10,000 during its entire production run, with only 450 going to the United Kingdom. It would be a cool thing if I could ever bring one to the United States. It is indeed a massive shame that the Panhard company went out of business in 1967 because I think they made some of the most striking yet innovative cars of the 60s. I mean, have a look at this. If this doesn't look like a fish, I do not know what does. And if you think Tesla is a minimalist interior designer, you have seen nothing yet. This car is minimalistic yet beautiful at the same time. Featuring a flat twin-cylinder engine, this car made 60 horsepower, which gave the Volkswagen Beetle's Flat 4 a run for its money. I would do anything to own something like this, and the way they sound too, if you've seen the video from Jay Leno's garage, these things sound absolutely fantastic. I would love to get my hands on one of these one day. Just to drive one is a lifelong dream of mine. I saw my first Polski Fiat 126P at the International Spy Museum's Parade of Trabant for 2024, and it completely blew my mind. I've always wanted one based on the pictures, but like the Citroën 2CV, after seeing one in the flesh, I cannot help but really want one now. I know they are tinny, I know they are tiny, but I just cannot help but love these things. As an Eastern Bloc automobile enthusiast, I could not resist putting the Cold War era Škoda on my list, mainly because not only do I love the way these things look, but the Škoda brand itself has history dating back to well over 100 years. If I could get my hands on one, I would live the life of dreams. But despite me seeing Ladas, Wartburgs, Trabants, and other Eastern Bloc vehicles in the flesh, I have actually never seen a Cold War era Škoda before. But if I could drive one, oh man, I could never put a price on that. The Pontiac Aztek has to make my list, mainly because I think it is simply hideous to look at. But some may argue, including me, that it was very much ahead of its time. I first saw my first Pontiac Aztek when I was 6 years old, going to first grade for the first time when my music teacher had one, and I couldn't help but think, what on earth is that? But even so, with a tent and a cooler, this thing is ready for any off-road adventure, assuming you can find one with all-wheel drive. but even so, with its ugly, charismatic looks, I can't help but think that I'm gonna own one of these days. Well viewers, we have finally reached the number 1 car, and that is the Pyeonghwa Hwiparam. I hope to God I pronounced that right, because this is in fact a North Korean car. Pyeonghwa means peace, which I find totally ironic. Anyway, it is a built under license Fiat, designed for the North Korean market only. And as a history nut, and as someone who's fascinated by the Cold War, I simply find this car truly fascinating. But given current events and the whole history between North and South Korea, I do think importing one myself would be almost as impossible as it could possibly get. But before you leave a comment down in the comment section saying I'm nothing but a communist and possibly a terrorist, just know that you're absolutely wrong. I just love the history of communism. I just think the whole car buying process in communist countries is simply fascinating. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And I will have more videos coming along soon.